The north of the north, a cold, hostile, and helpless place where every heartbeat is a miracle. The endless lakes freeze, creating ice deserts. Boreal forests, once refuges for wildlife, are covered in white. And the frozen Canadian tundra rises as the eternal resting place of the weak. This is the fiercest struggle wild species have ever faced against the merciless winter. Under such challenging conditions for any form of life, the dictators of the food chain cease to be the greatest enemy, and a sub-zero white ecosystem becomes the most ferocious predator. Faced with such savagery, each animal species, in a display of irreverence never seen before, and defying the odds of survival, adapts to the harsh climatic conditions. Seals, experts at sub-zero survival, gather in their hundreds on the ice to keep warm. The snowy owl, a snow-white bird, takes refuge in the dense vegetation, where it reveals no trace of its presence. And the Arctic hare, in its struggle against the freezing temperatures, takes shelter in its warm burrow. All the bounty of summer is just a memory, and in a frozen world, even a small handful of herbs is a treasure. The bison, colossal beasts, dig through the thick snow in search of the crumbs of autumn. The Arctic fox, a cunning scavenger, traverses this pale ecosystem, hoping to find one of the victims of the freezing temperatures. And wolf packs, ignoring the ravages of winter, go hunting. Their indifference to the harshness of the weather further limits the chances for other wild creatures of witnessing a new rebirth in spring. Lasting up to 9 months, the Canadian winter is one of nature's cruelest atrocities, and at the same time, one of its greatest spectacles. After a brief respite represented by a fleeting spring, a nearly non-existent summer, and an autumn that is only the peace before the storm, the imposing biomes of the Canadian Massif are dyed white, erasing everything in their path and plunging millions of wild creatures into an icy hell. With temperatures reaching -50 degrees Celsius, snow has taken over what was once a vibrant ecosystem, turning every corner white. To the west, the imposing Canadian mountain range, with mountains that touch the sky and filled with perpetual glaciers, witnesses how its eternal winter radiates across the plateaus and valleys. On the inland plains, home to fertile soils and endless grasslands, winter ailments have swept away all hope of life, leaving only a squalid white prairie, where scarcity reigns. Meanwhile, on the Great Lakes, a place blessed with comparatively warm temperatures, the thermometer easily rises above freezing. And, in the surrounding area, the once vibrant forests have been stripped of their green canopy, leaving a graveyard of tree trunks that stretches as far as the eye can see. Not even the smallest corner escapes what seems like a punishment from the Creator, or perhaps the perfect opportunity to show the purest and most untamed side of nature. Just as millions of migratory birds, sensing the implacable winter approaching, fled to more southerly lands where the climate offered no chance of survival, long before the Arctic tundra became hostile and barren, the formidable horned caribou turned south, setting out on one of the most astonishing journeys in the wild. Marching briskly toward more southern lands, the herds of these ungulates that inhabit the Arctic tundra do not stay to witness the full ferocity with which winter will hit their summer home. So, as soon as they perceive a tiny drop in temperature, they will set off on a journey of more than 400 kilometers to the northern border of the boreal forests. While this imposing taiga, the size of entire continents, will not escape the winter's harshness. The severity of its punishment is nowhere near the scourge of the cold in the northern tundra. Before setting out, with daylight hours dwindling daily and autumn forage reaching critical levels, these nearly 200-kilogram mammals gather in numerous herds of up to thousands as a survival measure for their demanding journey. In addition to the long distances, the path to their winter habitat is filled with checkpoints guarded by predators such as wolves, brown bears, lynxes, and wolverines, ready to take their share of such vast herds. Aware of the countless threats and the magnitude of their feat, the caribou take refuge in their large numbers to survive this demanding but necessary journey. For several weeks, at a steady trot, they will overcome every obstacle that crosses their path, whether it be endless steppes, rocky valleys, or even convulsive rivers, which, in just a few days, will be covered by a thick layer of ice. After an exhausting journey in which many inevitably fell by the wayside, either victims of fatigue or the appetite of voracious predators, the caribou arrive at their long-awaited destination. Almost simultaneously, just a few days after the triumphant entry of the great herds into the boreal forests, the Canadian winter begins to wreak havoc on this delicate biome. Inclement snowstorms fall day and night, burying everything in their path, and fierce winds batter the taiga without a shred of mercy. However, while other wildlife species feel the cold bite down to their bones, caribou stay relatively warm thanks to their natural coat, very useful at this time of year. With a very thick and dense layer of fur, the ungulates are able to withstand these attacks with astonishing ease. Furthermore, it's no coincidence that the packs have chosen to embark on a very long migration to these dense forests. The thousands, if not millions, of trees that fill this ecosystem create a natural barrier that protects these horned beasts from strong winds, as well as from being buried under a thick layer of snow. While in their former home, in the middle of the hostile Canadian tundra, they would have already perished, these endless forests of spruce and pine trees are a refuge for such majestic creatures. After days of intense snowstorms, in a show of mercy, the torrential downpours take a brief pause, and the caribou see the perfect moment to look for something to eat. However, in a white world covered by a thick layer of snow, even the smallest step must be taken with caution, as one mistake can end with one of these mammals buried. To move more easily, caribou have very large, wide hooves that function like snowshoes, distributing the weight of these giants evenly. In addition to turning what was once a welcoming forest into a hostile habitat, covered in quicksand in the form of snow, the drop in temperature brought on by winter makes the frigid air almost impossible to breathe. Caribou solve this serious problem with their large, furry noses, which warm the air before it reaches their lungs. Their hairy nose, in addition to allowing them to breathe easily, is an essential tool for finding food in this austere habitat. With the bounty of summer a mere memory, the caribou must adapt to their new reality. Feeding on the tiny treasures the Creator has given them in the form of fresh lichens several inches beneath the snow. No matter how merciless the snowfall, with a good nose, these hungry herbivores are able to perceive even the smallest moss and grass and hunt it down. With the help of their powerful paws, they can dig through the snow in just a few minutes, unearthing what are exquisite delicacies amid the scarcity that plagues the forest. After encountering a few lichens and dry grass, the cruel Canadian winter has decided it's had enough and returns with a vengeance, battering every corner of the taiga with intense storms. To withstand this merciless climate, the caribou often gather in large herds of up to thousands of ungulates. Huddled together, they manage to share as much warmth as possible. Likewise, these large concentrations of horned wolves are a survival measure against the hungry predators that roam the forest. A ferocious puma or a savage pack of wolves will think twice before harassing such a large herd, and will always prefer to prey on the solitary individuals who, if they don't become victims of winter sooner, will inevitably end up being hunted by the ruthless carnivores. As thousands of caribou continue to arrive in the boreal forests as winter sets in, a winter survivor lives high in the treetops, preferring to lead a solitary and elusive life. Although it may be difficult to see, among the white snow-covered trees, the snowy owl perches cold, calm, and above all, hungry. With snow-white, surprisingly dense plumage, this well-camouflaged bird is more than accustomed to the sub-zero temperatures that rule the Canadian winter. While thousands of bird species migrate vast distances south to escape the cold, the snowy owl stares winter in the face, allowing itself to be cushioned by the calamities of this frigid biome. With its entire body covered in feathers, including its feet and toes, this owl is prepared to stay warm no matter how low the thermostat drops. Thanks to its advanced ability to regulate its temperature, this small bird is able to live even in habitats at 40 degrees below zero, without even flinching. However, just as their high metabolism helps them stay immune to the extreme cold outside, it also contributes to a voracious appetite that needs to be satiated with a large amount of prey. And this is a very serious problem when you live in the middle of a nearly lifeless frozen prairie. With its stomach growling more than ever, the snowy owl has no choice but to go hunting amidst the hostilities facing its ecosystem. Since hunting during the freezing night, when temperatures are dropping to their lowest point, would mean certain death, unlike other owls, this skillful bird is primarily active during the day. Here, resting on its whitish fur, the snowy owl has an excellent advantage over its prey. It is practically invisible. With inclement winds whipping across the prairie, massive amounts of snow falling, and a bone-chilling cold, the last thing on the rodent's minds is likely becoming part of this skilled hunter's diet. But nature is cruel, and as soon as a small lemming or squirrel looms within its domain, the snowy owl leaps at its chance, swooping down from the sky at top speed, and, in just a couple of seconds, snatching up what will be its dinner. Thanks to its highly sensitive hearing, this white carnivore can detect even the quietest prey moving through the thick snow. Likewise, its stealthy flight, thanks to its body covered in soft feathers, allows it to approach defenseless prey without them even seeing it coming. Given its high nutritional needs, the snowy owl cannot afford to remain sheltered, even when winter wreaks havoc on this already battered ecosystem. With a quota of up to a dozen small rodents a day, this skilled winter hunter cannot fail, and every mouse, hare, or squirrel that dares to set foot outside its burrow must pay the consequences. Despite its enviable hunting skills, on days of austerity, the snowy owl will inevitably have to go to bed on an empty stomach. With all the rodents huddled in their winter shelters, and the rivers teeming with fish turned to stone, there is no food for miles around. Having accepted that it will not be able to meet all of its daily caloric needs, to save energy, the snowy owl often remains motionless for hours, resting peacefully on a perch. Since on the coldest days of the Canadian winter, no feathers are worth anything, to avoid falling victim to the long list of low temperatures, the snowy owl seeks shelter in large rocks, low hills or mounds, and small depressions in the ground. Every obstacle, no matter how small, as long as it represents a barrier between its small body and the icy winds, will be taken advantage of by this cold-blooded owl. Aside from the sound of a tiny mouse hopping through the snow, one of the few things that might prompt a snowy owl to leave its privileged refuge is hearing that another of these territorial birds has invaded its little corner of this, until now, peaceful ecosystem. With all the scarcity plaguing its already icebound habitat, one thing a snowy owl cannot tolerate is one of its fellow owls trying to take over the few resources it has. Therefore, as soon as it realizes the presence of a stranger in its domain, this bird will not hesitate to kick him out the way he came. To do this, before engaging in hand-to-hand combat, the defending owl will strike a series of poses, ruffling its feathers to appear larger, as well as positioning its wings in a V shape, which demonstrates its large wingspan. In addition to these clear warning signs, the fixed gaze and vocalizations in the form of whistles and deep screams are displays of strength intended to intimidate outsiders. Although these intimidation rituals often achieve their goal by driving away the invader, they are not always successful, and sometimes violence is the only alternative to gaining respect in this hostile ecosystem. When the invasive owl, driven by necessity, refuses to budge in its attempts to expand its territory, perhaps a few high-speed dives will change its mind. While these attacks rarely even touch the birds, they are usually intimidating enough to make the conquering owl prefer a safe retreat. If, despite all the ferocity displayed, the bird is still unconvinced to flee, a swift and dangerous fight with sharp talons and powerful blows with its feet will likely decide ownership of this frozen patch of land. While the snowy owl faces winter austerity firsthand, for the Canada marmot, the scarcity of the ecosystem is nowhere near one of its problems. Of course, that's only if they've done their work well during the fall. Marmots are one of the few wild species that practice true hibernation, falling into a deep sleep when low temperatures strike mercilessly. Of course, to be able to wrap themselves carefree in Morpheus's coat throughout the long Canadian winter, these furry mammals must make their preparations. In autumn, when low temperatures have not yet taken hold of their still hospitable habitat, marmots are in the midst of building a very complex burrow to help protect them from the elements. Although they already have a burrow for the rest of the year, it is not usually the same one they will use for the long-awaited winter. This much more welcoming shelter will have everything you need to survive one of the most hostile seasons for life on the entire planet. Typically, the chosen site is near rock formations, trees, or perhaps thick bushes, where the main entrance is camouflaged. Here, the marmots will begin digging like there's no tomorrow, using their very useful claws. Although they are prodigious diggers, the work is quite arduous, as the burrow must be approximately 2 meters underground to escape the frost line. The burrow often consists of tunnels up to 15 meters long, with several chambers specially built for certain purposes. The main room is the hibernation chamber, where they will spend their long winter sleep. For greater comfort, these skilled survivors often line the floor with dry grass and leaves, which provides additional thermal insulation. Furthermore, to ensure the integrity of their highly complex shelter, marmots can compact the tunnel walls by butting them with their heads, and even use roots as beams. All this is to ensure they don't become trapped in the event of a potential collapse. With their burrow now taking shape, these experienced engineers turn their attention to another of the major problems of the winter season: food. Since the worst is expected every year during the Canadian winter, marmots would never plan to go out in search of food. when their habitat is fighting a bitter battle against the low temperatures. With no other choice, these tender survivors do what anyone would do and set out to eat everything within reach. Grasses, leaves, shoots, berries, blackberries, and any other vegetation that crosses their paths automatically become part of the diet of these insatiable herbivores, which, more out of gluttony than anything else, devour everything in their path as a survival strategy. With this excessive feeding, they can even double their weight, gaining a very convenient reserve of crucial fat for when winter's scarcity knocks. Since these small mammals must consume more than half a kilogram of food a day to meet their dietary needs and contribute to their winter fat reserves, sometimes the availability of fruits, herbs, and shoots falls short. And, with no other option, in a radical change in their diet, the marmots opt to become momentarily omnivorous, even feasting on insects, eggs, and even carrion. While these food sources are far from their favorites, they do offer a very high nutritional value that can help them gain weight more quickly. And with winter just around the corner, groundhogs are doing what they have to do to survive. With its weight now up to 100%, and the sky in the distance announcing the beginning of winter hostilities, the marmot, after taking one last look at the dying autumn landscape, hides in its warm shelter. To keep the low temperatures outside and a comfortable environment inside, before curling up in its hibernation chamber, it will seal the main entrance. After this, it will not see the outside again until the long-awaited arrival of spring. Once in the comfort of its burrow, it will curl up peacefully, entering a deep sleep. In this lethargy, its metabolism slows to a crawl, reducing its heart rate from 100 to just 5 beats per minute. Its temperature drops from a pleasant 37 degrees to less than 3, and it barely breathes every 6 minutes. Although it may seem as though the sleeping groundhog won't wake up until the sun rises again after the harshest winter months, the truth is that approximately every 2 to 4 weeks, their metabolism reactivates for a few hours, giving them the opportunity to readjust their temperature and change positions during their very long nap. In one of the most striking contrasts in the wild, while species like the large caribou and the snowy owl fiercely resist the onslaught of winter firsthand, the diligent marmot, thanks to its exhaustive preparation, can rest peacefully, awaiting a new dawn, where this entire winter ecosystem will be a thing of the past, and a warm and abundant spring will rise before its eyes. For now, there are still many months to go until that long-awaited moment of emerging from the burrow. With the marmot sheltered in its comfortable burrow, one of its fiercest rivals in this demanding sub-zero realm faces the intense weather conditions. Not having the same fortune as the marmot, and being able to sink into a deep sleep and escape the hostilities of winter, the Arctic fox must fend for itself to avoid succumbing to this far from encouraging prospect. Fortunately, the Creator in all his wisdom has endowed this small mammal with all the skills necessary to overcome the adversities of the season. With one of the densest coats of any mammal, the Arctic fox is able to maintain its tiny body at temperatures of more than 30 degrees Celsius. Against wind, snow, and ice, this quintessential survivor manages to make a space for himself in the midst of the frozen ecosystem. Small ears, a short snout, and fur-covered paws are other adaptations this dog has to the sub-zero temperature that inhospitable Canada offers. Likewise, even though it doesn't hibernate, this wild canid accumulates a thick layer of fat during the fall, which helps it overcome the scarcity of winter and complements its warm coat. Although not as prodigious a digger as the cunning marmot, the Arctic fox also knows that part of its survival in this frozen world lies in finding a good shelter. To do so, it may dig a rudimentary tunnel itself, or even benefit from the hard work of another species, becoming an occupant of someone else's den. Polar bears often leave large holes behind, which the Arctic fox can use to take shelter when the weather turns colder and more hostile than usual. On nights when the snowfall is relentless, the little fox curls up in any little hole, curling into a ball to conserve as much heat as possible. Although it can make use of its more modest fat reserves accumulated after the much more bountiful autumn, the fox will inevitably have to undertake some very demanding hunts on ice. Since its tiny size does not even allow it to consider colossal prey such as the abundant caribou, this inveterate carnivore, like the snowy owl, has a diet based mainly on the highly nutritious lemmings. Of course, in an ecosystem where everything turns white for miles around and a suffocating silence takes over forests, grasslands, and mountains, having a refined sense of hearing is crucial to detecting any rodent moving under the snow. Thanks to its equally whitish fur, the Arctic fox hides perfectly, waiting for one of these high-protein snacks to make the slightest mistake. Sometimes, just a tiny squeak can be the signal the mammal has been waiting to launch an attack, and, using its sharp claws, hunt down prey that, although not very substantial, could even save its life. Of course, in a biome covered by slippery snow, where vision is limited, and everything around is white, even a skilled hunter like the Arctic fox can fail. After numerous attempts to hunt down a rodent, the dog must know when to give up, because exposing itself to the elements for prolonged periods, exhausting its last reserves of energy, may be the last thing it will do. Likewise, successfully capturing prey doesn't always mean this small predator will be able to calm the rumblings in its stomach. Very often, after catching a juicy lemming or a tiny mouse, the fox falls victim to the needs of other carnivores, and wolves, golden eagles, snowy owls, and even other foxes won't hesitate to snatch the prey from its clutches. What in summer was just one small rodent out of the dozens they could hunt a day, in winter becomes a privilege. After a very unsuccessful hunting trip, accepting his defeat, the Arctic fox decides to take refuge again from the winter's ailments. However, on his way to his makeshift den, he notices something that could be his salvation. Using his trained sense of smell, the unmistakable smell of fresh meat reaches his nose, and without hesitation, he decides to head towards what appears to be a feast in the middle of this austere habitat. Upon arrival, his suspicions are confirmed, as it is the carcass of an imposing caribou that has succumbed to the unbearable weather conditions, and with no time to waste, the fox devours everything he can before other predators find out about such a coveted feast. Here, the Arctic fox won't just eat until it's stuffed. In a show of ingenuity, it will tear off a piece of the animal and carry it to a hiding place where it can store it for later. Usually, a small crevice between rocks is the ideal place to serve as a pantry. In contrast to the generally herbivorous marmot, when the Arctic fox can't seem to get a piece of meat into its mouth, whether in the form of fresh prey or the not inconsiderable carrion, the dog will demonstrate why it is an omnivore. In a pure display of extreme survival, this strict carnivore will not hesitate to devour lichens, mosses, or berries when its only alternative is to perish from hunger. However, before opting for such a radical measure, he will always try to exhaust all his carnivorous options. One of those strategies for obtaining the remains of prey is precisely to follow one of the most formidable predators in all of white Canada. While most wild species struggle for survival against scarce resources, the polar bear is experiencing what it considers one of the best seasons of the year. For this colossal beast weighing over 700 kilograms, the arrival of low temperatures marks the beginning of its frozen kingdom, a place where ice fields extend as far as the eye can see, and it can become a voracious killer. While other mammals must spend months preparing to survive these demanding conditions, the polar bear is not even fazed by the drop in temperature to below -30 degrees Celsius. Thanks to its dense fur, as well as a thick layer of fat up to 10 centimeters long, this master of the snow stays as warm as in summer, even with the icy wind whipping through its harsh habitat. Although the polar bear has a snowy appearance that camouflages it perfectly in its pale surroundings, its fur is actually black, which provides many benefits when it comes to absorbing ultraviolet radiation, and thus, heat. In a demonstration of their colossal adaptations to winter's harshness, while caribou flee south in terror, escaping the harshest temperatures, the solitary polar bear, in pursuit of sea ice, heads northward to hunt for its favorite prey, seals. With hundreds of kilometers of white desert stretching out on the horizon, this mammal is capable of traversing one of the most hostile ecosystems on the planet to reach its desired destination. Not even the freezing waters are enough to stop him on his long journey, because in addition to ignoring the harsh winter weather, he is a more than skilled swimmer. After several days of plowing through the icy waters, as well as walking steadily on the slippery ice, this white beast has reached its longed-for destination. The sign marking the finish line is the blowhole of a seal, likely hunting fish or krill. Once it finds its ambush site, the polar bear waits patiently for the moment to strike. During these far from brief hunts, the predator can wait up to 3 days for its prey to appear. Since an exhausted seal will emerge at any moment to breathe through the hole in the ice, the bear is optimistic about his strategy. After a long wait, the moment arrives, and the seal emerges from the water, unaware that it is heading for certain death. With a single blow to the head with its powerful claw, this enormous beast manages to deprive the surprise seal of its life, and with a single pull, it pulls it out of the icy waters to enjoy its feast. Although this attack strategy can take several days to even encounter prey, the seal's colossal size ensures that the prey will be more than appetizing. While this hunting strategy is one of the most common ones they employ, they will not always stick to it, since after several days lurking at the blowholes, sometimes the long-awaited seal never appears. When this happens, the polar bear gets a little more creative and heads straight for what to him are just huge prey. With mother seals raising their young in shelters beneath the snow, some bears choose to crush these hiding places, forcing them out, which will inevitably lead to certain death. If they don't stumble upon these ice burrows, bears can also dive directly into the water, engaging in long chases that can cost them invaluable energy. Although a single large seal can ensure survival for several days, sometimes even this voracious predator is unsuccessful in the hunt and must adapt to survival by burning through its fat reserves. By starving for prolonged periods, the polar bear can lose up to 1 kilogram of fat per day, which can gradually lead to a considerable reduction in its weight, as well as its enviable protection against the cold. Of course, living in areas farther north near the Canadian Arctic, snowstorms aren't particularly pleasant. And with a bear gripped by austerity and winds exceeding 100 kilometers per hour, he has no choice but to take shelter. For this, digging a large hole in the snow and burying himself is a surefire option. After this display of winter devastation, the polar bear sees his fortunes change when he encounters an Arctic fox who, unlike him, has had good luck hunting. Here, the much more robust bear will exert all his physical superiority to seize what he believes is his. While for male bears, winter is the time of year when they can venture out on these formidable hunting trips near the sea ice. For female bears, the winter season holds a very different future. Pregnant since last spring, with the arrival of low temperatures, they are forced to take shelter in shelters under the snow, up to 3 meters deep. Here, the bear will enter a lethargy that will keep her safe from the elements, and of course, she will lose impressive amounts of fat, all in order to keep the little cubs in her womb alive. With no time to wait for spring to arrive, the bear gives birth to 2 tiny cubs weighing just 500 grams, who will require her care and, of course, her nourishing breastfeeding. Nursing these tender cubs will consume almost every ounce of energy this exemplary mother has, and as soon as spring appears on the horizon, she will set out to devour everything in her path, all while continuing to neglect her maternal responsibilities. With the polar bear in the far north patiently waiting for the reign of these frigid temperatures to end, further south, where lush boreal forests collide with arid tundra, stands one of the most surprising winter survivors in all of wild Canada. While far from the enormous size of the caribou or the ferocity displayed by the polar bear, when it comes to the fight for survival in sub-zero temperatures, the Arctic hare is among the most impressive species in this ice-bound world. With wide, furry legs that act like snowshoes, lush white fur, and short ears and limbs that limit heat loss, every inch of this small mammal's body is adapted for winter survival. Although the thought of the Arctic hare automatically brings to mind its snowy white fur, the truth is that this desirable coat coloration is a result of seasonal adaptation. Just a couple of weeks ago, this lagomorph sported a fine, grayish-brown coat. It is with the onset of freezing temperatures that, as a survival measure, it has embarked on this more than favorable molt. In addition to making it nearly invisible to its many predators in this ecosystem, its fur is crucial for keeping it warm. Even on the coldest days in its small home at the edge of the boreal forests. Also, although it may not seem so due to its diminutive size, the Arctic hare has a very thick layer of fat that accounts for up to 1/5 of its body weight, which helps it retain all its heat, even during those days when food is scarce. As seems to be the norm for Canadian wintering species, the Arctic hare knows well that during those days when temperatures are at their peak, a good shelter is crucial to avoid freezing to death. However, unlike the hard-working marmot that spends weeks building its burrow, the hare is content with a small hole under the snow to protect it from the blizzards. Although this rudimentary hole may not be very comfortable, it is a privileged place compared to having to spend those freezing nights outdoors. No matter how cozy its humble shelter is, the hare cannot afford to stay there forever, because sooner or later hunger strikes, and this small mammal faces the challenge of finding food in, at this time of year, one of the most infertile places on Earth. While during the still distant spring, this herbivore enjoys devouring countless grasses, leaves, flowers, and plants in a 180-degree turn in resource availability. This small survivor must adapt to feeding on literally everything edible that comes its way, or rather under its path. Sniffing out every corner of its burrow like a bloodhound, The clever hare manages to detect under the snow rich mosses, willow, and birch bark, or some nutritious Arctic herbs. As soon as it locates them, with the help of its front paws, it digs through the deep snow until it reaches these succulent snacks, which could save its life, or at least save it from a crushing famine. In addition to its highly sensitive nose, this hunter of any plant matter relies on an excellent memory to recall the location of shrubs, plants, and lichens before the arrival of winter. Thus, knowing every inch of the area surrounding its burrow, it can dig with complete confidence, knowing it will find food. Despite being very happy to find anything resembling food under the thick snow, the Arctic hare can't stay long to enjoy its feast. Just as it has left its shelter in search of food, owls, Arctic foxes, and wolves have also decided to leave their hiding places in an attempt to escape starvation. And an Arctic hare is one prey no one will want to let go. However, even in the midst of a challenging winter, and after days of starvation, this small mammal doesn't think it will be easy prey, and if any of its predators want a piece of it, they will have to reach it first. Thanks to its wide legs and slender body, the Arctic hare is capable of running at over 60 kilometers per hour, even on slippery snow. Its great agility, combined with its keen senses of sight and hearing, make hunting at a feat many predators are unwilling to attempt. These constant escapes, combined with the challenging weather conditions, often prevent the hare from staying outside for long in search of food, so nights with rumbling stomach sounds are more than frequent. During the harsh winter, as a sign of its desire to survive, this herbivore does what it must to avoid perishing. With a digestive system that doesn't absorb all the nutrients in its diet, it decides to consume its own feces to get the most out of every bite. Although this may be an unorthodox practice, when life is at stake, the Arctic hare undoubtedly stands toe-to-toe with the most majestic survivors of this white world under the grip of winter. Aside from the Arctic hare's enviable survival skills, it doesn't always get to see a new dawn in spring. Nature is merciless, and often, after surviving for months through ingenuity and sacrifice, with only a few days left until the end of winter, a vicious coyote appears in the path of the now dead hare, and, with just one bite, ends its extreme survival. This is a somewhat sad end for the little hare, but the beginning of a good meal for the hungry canine, who had not tasted the juicy taste of fresh meat for several days. Weighing over 80 kilograms and with a powerful bite, the coyote is one of those living nightmares that, ignoring the harsh conditions of the ecosystem, stalk countless prey. Of course, despite having hunted down the unfortunate hare, this was a one-off incident, and not a reflection of the dog's winter season so far, since, like herbivores and other hunters, this wild dog has seen all the bounty of autumn disappear, plunging it into almost perpetual hunger. However, there's no time for regrets, and the coyote has declared all-out war on any small mammal near its harsh habitat. Thanks to its keen hearing, even any defenseless rodent found up to a meter beneath the snow is prey it won't let slip. Just seconds after spotting small prey beneath a thick layer of frost, the coyote, using its powerful paws, quickly reaches the hiding place of those who will now become its food. Given its extreme ferocity, unlike the much smaller Arctic fox, the coyote doesn't have to fear someone trying to take its prey away from it. or at least not if they don't want to get a good bite. In addition to being an efficient winter hunter, when after months of winter prey simply doesn't come, in a show of ingenuity, this canid closely follows the movements of faithful carnivores like wolves and crows, in order to be guided to places with juicy carrion. While it will always prefer the taste of fresh prey, given the current conditions in its habitat, it cannot be very selective with its food, and even the smallest piece of meat is a pleasure that very few can afford. In addition to demeaning themselves as scavengers, another survival measure for this ferocious wild dog is to break away from their traditional solitary and reclusive lifestyle and join together in large groups. Of course, far from having the selfless purpose of socializing, these temporary packs have the sole objective of ensuring the survival of each member and are capable of hunting larger prey, such as white-tailed deer, caribou, or even moose. When even following hungry wolf packs or joining forces with other wolves won't get them a good meal, the coyote, putting all pretensions aside, uses its powerful flesh-rending jaws to devour all manner of berries and fruits found deep in the boreal forests. Of course, just because it doesn't have to fear countless predators doesn't mean this canid can roam freely through the frozen forest. The harsh winter weather spares even the highest levels of the food chain, hitting both prey and predators alike. As a contingency measure, as soon as the freezing temperatures take over, the coyote develops a thick layer of winter fur, which insulates it from the extreme cold. Likewise, its paws become covered in thick fur, allowing it to both better conserve body heat and walk easily in the snow. In addition to finding nutritious rodent colonies by burrowing in the deep snow, when winter sets in, the coyote also finds shelter using its very useful digging paws. Although it usually occupies burrows abandoned by foxes or badgers, given the size differences, this dog often makes the occasional modification, such as adding a depth of about 3 meters. This makes the shelter much warmer, reaching an almost pleasant -5 degrees Celsius, while the outside temperature is a torturous -40 degrees Celsius. Just as a coyote enjoys a warm refuge in the midst of a blizzard that sweeps away everything in its path, a few thousand miles south, in a small tributary of the Great Lakes, among frozen streams, nature's engineers enjoy all the benefits of their hard work during the fall. Regardless of the wild species, their winter refuge will never be even close to the highly complex burrows of these construction marvels. For beavers, surviving the harsh Canadian winter is only possible with a good burrow, and these small mammals take this task very seriously. It all starts before the cold temperatures take their toll. Here, the beavers, like expert builders, are busy renovating their enviable beaver kennel. This impressive shelter, strategically placed in the middle of a stream, is a feat of wild engineering. Built with branches, stones, and mud, this imposing den has walls up to more than 1 meter thick, insulating it from even the coldest temperatures. To keep as much heat inside as possible, and predators out, the only entrance to the burrow is through underwater tunnels, all below what will be the water's freezing line. While it may look imposing from the outside, the best part of this shelter is inside. Inside, it features a spacious chamber elevated more than 20 centimeters above the water, preventing possible flooding. It's also lined with pieces of bark and dried grass, making it warmer and more comfortable. Thanks to their strong teeth, as well as the abundance of large trees in their habitat, beavers have no problem obtaining all the materials they need. With such efficient saw teeth, they can fell even very thick trees in just a few minutes and carry them to their work sites. Since they tend to reuse their burrows for up to several generations, After the hard work their ancestors have done, only a few remodelings and some maintenance of the structure are necessary for the following winter. With the task of finding a good shelter already underway, these resourceful survivors turn their attention to another of the major problems brought on by the white days of the Canadian winter: food. Since the area around their burrow will be covered in a thick layer of ice, it's not even an option for these herbivores to go out and look for food during the icy days ahead. So, with no other alternative, they work efficiently, collecting every last branch from poplar, willow, birch, or maple. Each tiny stick is carried near their burrow and stored underwater, where they gradually build their winter storage. Having their food cache close to their shelter keeps it within reach, even when a thick layer of ice forms on the river. In addition to a good beaver den and copious amounts of food, these mammals prepare their bodies for the inclement weather that will take over their home for a long time. To this end, while transporting every small piece of food to their reserve, they can't resist devouring a few snacks from time to time. In contrast to marmots, which can gain significant weight, beavers focus solely on accumulating a strategic reserve of fat to give them an extra dose of warmth for those sub-zero days. All this fat will be reflected mainly in its large tail, which will be an important energy store. In addition to this warmth, no wild species can survive the harsh Canadian winter without a good natural coat. To achieve this, beavers have a very dense, double-layered coat that helps keep them warm. In addition to their thickness, these furry herbivores have sebaceous glands at the base of their tails, which release an oily substance called castoreum. When they groom themselves, this oil is spread all over their bodies, making their fur waterproof, which will be very helpful when they have to dive into the icy waters to find their food cache. Although it might seem that, with a good fat reserve and an enviable shelter, they are more than ready to begin a deep hibernation, the truth is that these mammals do not hibernate, as they remain active throughout this demanding season. Of course, always inside their cozy beaver den or underwater. As autumn fades and winter gives way, the beavers dive into the water and swim toward their den. With all their good work, all they have left to do is adapt to their new reality of confinement. Despite not hibernating, with little to do inside their shelter, they tend to minimize their activity and metabolic rate to make the most of every energy reserve. As temperatures drop, a thick layer of ice forms in the tributaries surrounding their burrows, insulating these mammals from the outside world. Similarly, the moisture deposited on the walls of the shelter transforms into a thin layer of ice that acts as an additional barrier against the cold. While all other wild species face the hardships of winter, these resourceful survivors are able to navigate this demanding season in relative luxury. In fact, thanks to the diligent work of the pack's adults, the youngest members even gain significant weight during what, for others, is a season of extreme hunger. While the young beavers rest in the safety of their warm burrows in the middle of a frozen plain, the bison stare the harshest side of winter straight in the face and allow themselves to be wrapped in its icy blanket. These imposing ungulates demonstrate that a warm burrow isn't always necessary to survive freezing temperatures. Of course, given their colossal size of over a ton, there is no burrow that could even house these enormous beasts. Like beavers, bison prepare for the arrival of extreme cold by developing a very dense, woolly coat that acts as a natural coat. This thick layer of brown hair acts as a very efficient insulator, keeping the cold out and the mammal's body at a comfortable temperature. In areas like their backs, the thermal insulation can be so strong that a large amount of snow accumulates without melting. Thanks to this enviable coat, bison can even sleep in the open air, where temperatures reach -40 degrees Celsius on a normal day, and wake up to tell the tale. The bison's enormous body is dominated by its copious hump, which, in addition to housing important muscles to support its large head, also stores infinite amounts of fat that help it stay warm, no matter how harsh the weather. Since one of the greatest risks for large ungulates like moose, caribou, and bison is getting stuck in thick snow, the creator, in a show of intelligence, equipped these giants with sturdy legs and large hooves. These allow them to move across any terrain without the risk of sinking into what might seem like white quicksand. Typically, as a survival strategy, bison herds walk in long lines known as snow trains, with the leader of the group leading the way, opening a path for the rest of the ungulates and creating a relatively easy trail to traverse. In addition to allowing them to walk with amazing dexterity on the snow, their wide hooves perform an excellent function when digging up food. Since these horned beavers are not as fortunate as the beavers in being able to store food for the winter, they have no other alternative, and facing the cold temperatures head-on, tend to take long walks, even in the midst of inclement storms, looking for anything they can put in their mouths. Given its enormous size, just one specimen requires no less than 27 kilograms of forage per day. With such a demanding task ahead of them, relying on their very sensitive sense of smell, the bison managed to find true delicacies buried under the snow in the form of grasses, reeds, lichens, or dried herbs. In addition to their powerful legs, they also often use their large heads to dig up these somewhat nutritious food sources. While they have no problem digging, when fierce winds whip through their frozen habitat, these herbivores know exactly where to go to enjoy those areas of the plain where the snow has been blown away by blizzards, saving them from having to expend energy digging up food. Just as coyotes sometimes chase wolf packs in search of scraps when food is scarce, clever bison may follow the tracks left by elk or caribou in the hope of finding fresh food at the end of the trail, although they are usually unfazed by the challenging weather conditions. When winter unleashes its full ferocity upon their habitat, in an extreme effort to survive, bison may choose to temporarily retreat to the safety of their herd. Grouping together in dozens, they share warmth and are exposed as little as possible to the heavy blizzards and prolonged snowfalls that destroy everything in their path. In these groups, they tend to lie down with their furry backs facing the wind, despite not being migratory. When winter takes its toll on their habitat, these giants will have no problem traveling great distances in the snow in search of better living conditions. Their destination will always be areas with a thinner layer of snow, allowing them to more easily dig into the ground and unearth their coveted food. With scarcity hitting the bison herds, all that camaraderie shown throughout the winter is slowly beginning to subside. And more males are deciding to question the dominant bull's decisions. What begins as mere hooves stamping on the ground and vigorous head shaking can quickly escalate into fierce charges with their sharp horns and powerful shoves that even topple their opponent. When these uprisings occur, the dominant male will not hesitate to use his physical superiority to remind his subordinates of the social hierarchy. Although these fights can sometimes drag on, prudence often prevails, and the bison know that engaging in an exhaustive duel in the freezing cold can cost them their lives. In addition to attempting to change the group hierarchy, another reason why one of these ungulates may become aggressive toward a conspecific is a conflict over ownership of a patch of vegetation. After months of winter, with tons of snow covering their now completely white ecosystem, Those areas where even a trace of soil can still be seen are a real privilege. And, with dozens of mouths to feed in the herd, the shoving and pushing can decide who gets this coveted spot. Although the bison's colossal size puts them beyond the reach of most predators in wild Canada, when scarcity becomes overwhelming, even these towering, living mountains of snow are not safe from devour. Hearing a deafening howl in the distance, the herd quickly runs away in terror, for they know well what it means. Although ungulates are all-terrain, in the grip of desperation, one soon succumbs to the chaos and is left behind. This unfortunate bison has written its fate, and soon a hungry pack of wolves arrives to give it a prolonged and painful death. Weighing up to 80 kilograms, and with a bite capable of crushing even the hardest bones, the Arctic wolf is one of the most feared predators in this winter-bound ecosystem. While taking on one of these savage canids is a feat for small mammals, the real challenge lies in facing off against an entire coordinated pack of up to a dozen of these insatiable killers. Led by a skilled and calculating alpha, the wolves are able to maintain their relentless dominance even when winter takes hold of their home. Like species like small beavers and their prey, giant bison, Arctic wolves have a dense double-layered coat that insulates them from frigid temperatures. With every part of their body well protected, they can remain active even in the harshest winter storms. In addition to their cozy coat, these dogs have an efficient metabolism that adjusts to their needs to produce more heat with less energy, thus avoiding the dreaded hypothermia. Another of their surprising winter adaptations is that they limit blood circulation to non-vital areas of their body, such as their legs and ears, and concentrate it on their trunk, where their main organs are located. Living in packs provides countless benefits for these canids. One of them is snuggling up together tenderly to share the warmth. Despite having very warm fur as a survival measure, when the icy blizzards arrive, the pack opts to seek some comfortable shelter. Usually, a simple depression in the ground, a rocky outcrop, or even an abandoned burrow can be the perfect place to curl up and rest. With the storm slowly easing, the pack soon emerges from the snow and sets out on one of their many hunts. With their stomachs growling from several days of unsuccessful hunting, catching some prey is becoming a matter of life or death. The alpha, usually an experienced survivor, is the one who will decide the fate of the pack. Using his advanced sense of smell, as well as an inexplicable wild instinct, he decides to follow a path towards what he hopes will be a large herd of deer. As the pack advances, the alpha's suspicions become reality, and a herd of white-tailed deer appears on the horizon. In a demonstration of their meticulous skill as strategists, going so far as to dart about to capture one of the ungulates, Arctic wolves often closely observe packs of herbivores, searching for even the slightest sign of weakness. Typically, an old deer, a young fawn, or a sick deer will be the unfortunate chosen one. Sometimes, to test the herd's escape skills, the pack, before launching its final attack, briefly chases the ungulates to assess their physical condition. After this simulation, having confirmed their suspicions, they will plan the final assault. Thanks to their whitish coats with shades of gray, each dog can hide among the pale vegetation and stalk undetected. At the alpha's call, the pack launches its attack, wreaking havoc on the herd, with deer running for their lives in terror. Often, when the first charge is unsuccessful, the pack has no problem pursuing its prey for long distances. In a relay race, each wolf takes turns leading the chase, until an exhausted prey decides to surrender to certain death at the bite of these impregnable hunters. Since a long chase can significantly exhaust the pack, The alpha often demonstrates his strategic skills by using his knowledge of the terrain to direct the prey toward a natural obstacle. Almost always, an area of deep snow or a frozen river ends up being the perfect trap where the ungulate will be unable to continue its run, and where the wolves will end a fast of several days. Having experienced the ravages of hunger firsthand, each canid will not limit itself to eating only what it needs, and will gorge itself until it can no longer eat anymore. On these winter hunts, after prolonged famines, each Arctic wolf can devour more than 10 kilograms of meat in a single meal. While wolves can display all their ferocity as apex predators during their daytime hunts, when night falls and the darkness obscures even their prey, these canines display their remarkable synchronization as a pack. Through howls, choruses, and an inexplicable sixth sense, these imposing hunters carry out complex ambushes that leave their prey with no chance of escape. Thus, while the marmots rest peacefully a few meters underground, and the caribou take refuge in the depths of the boreal forests, with the moon as their only witness, the pack instills all its terror in another prey, which, after surviving the relentless winter, could not avoid succumbing to the bite of these ruthless hunters of the snow. After such acts of savagery, in what seems to be a show of mercy from the Creator, after long months of snowfall, blizzards, and all kinds of natural disasters besieging Canadian wildlife, a light appears at the end of the tunnel. In the distance, as if by some kind of miracle, a radiant sun rises on the horizon, once again filling every space of this battered, frozen world with light. Wrapping this ecosystem in its long-awaited warmth, spring gradually takes hold in every biome. From the far north, where the polar bear, after months of hibernation, can emerge from her winter refuge with her young cubs, to the more merciful south, where the multitudinous herds of caribou, with the drop in temperatures, set out once again on a marathon journey, this time headed north to their breeding grounds. The little beavers, after months without seeing the outside, emerge from their cozy shelter and, like skilled survivors with no time to waste, begin working on renovations for the following winter. The snowy owl, having weathered the harshest snowstorms in the open air, is preparing to grow its family with the triumphant arrival of spring during its long-awaited breeding season. Meanwhile, the bison herds, having survived this ordeal on ice, with the contrasting abundance of spring opening before their eyes, begin to eat until their endless appetite is satisfied. For the tiny marmot, after months buried, seeing a new dawn in spring seems like a dream come true, and it soon leaves its burrow to explore the surroundings of its newly green habitat. Although very happy to have made it through the inhospitable Canadian winter, the thaw soon reveals the ravages of the atrocities experienced by many, with thousands of corpses buried in the thick snow, serving as carrion for hungry carnivores. Likewise, as the arrival of spring brings a wealth of herbivores, with beavers, marmots, caribou, and other species abandoning their winter refuges, predators will not miss this opportunity to subdue such a vast array of prey. Having suffered through atrocious hunger during the winter, foxes, bears, coyotes, and wolves are poised to devour anything in their path, ushering in another of the wildest chapters of the majestic animal life in hostile Canada. Have you marveled at the stories of wild species battling the harsh Canadian winter? If so, don't leave without giving us your valuable like. Also, if you want to support our channel and stay up to date on upcoming releases, don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell. If you're interested in sharing these stories of savagery and irreverence in the face of low temperatures, you can also share the video with your friends. Don't forget to leave your favorite animal species in the comments section. Without further ado, We'll see you next time with more stories of struggles against the elements, battles with predators, and above all, wildlife.